For more than 8 centuries, the jury has stood as one of the great pillars of British justice. A simple but radical idea that ordinary people, not the state, decide guilt. It's been our constitutional and democratic safeguard, our final defence against authority gone too far. But now that pillar is shaking. The government is proposing to strip away jury trials for most crimes. Supporters say it's a necessary fix for a system on the brink. Critics are calling it something else entirely. The biggest attack on the justice system this country has ever seen. If it goes ahead, it would rewrite the relationship between the citizen and the state. It would hand more power to the authorities and take it away from you, the public. In this episode, we explore what it would mean for fairness, transparency, and trust, and why the fate of the age-old jury system has become a battleground for the future of British justice. Welcome to the Crime Agents. Welcome back to the Crime Agents with me, crime journalist Andy Hughes.
And me, the ex-cop Neil Basu.
So, Neil, before we get into this, we've had quite a few people get in touch, and it's about last week's episode. You mentioned that you were a chocolate salesman. You would not believe the amount of people who are getting in touch saying, what chocolate did he sell?
Well, I worked for a little-known company that you'll never have heard of called Mars. So you try. It's not the
Premier
world's
League.
Most difficult sales job, selling a Mars
Do you know, I was
bar.
just about to say that, you know. It's hardly a difficult job selling chocolate, is it?
All I would say is I was remarkably popular as a chocolate salesman,
Yeah.
not so much as a cop or a banker, which is what I did before selling chocolate.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'm still a little bit fond of it, as you can probably tell for our YouTube.
Well, do you know
watchers.
what? I listened back to the episode and I was kicking myself for not digging deeper when you said a chocolate salesman. I was like, what?
You mean taking the milk?
Yeah. Well, it was an open goal, wasn't it?
It
And
was.
you know I like open goals.
And I offered that to you. A bit like
did.
Newcastle.
Very, very, very kind of you. Right, let's look at this. So, before
What a dramatic opening
yeah, well,
by you there.
do you think?
I thought so. I mean, I
overly
wonder whether we're in
dramatic?
slightly different places on this issue.
Well, I'm sure we are. Let's get into it. So, before we do delve into the detail, let's just talk about what juries are, just to remind everyone. If you are sent a jury summons by post, it is picked by random off the electoral roll. You then go into court a few weeks later, and then you are then put into a jury pool of about 15 to 20 people, more like 15 people these days. And then from that, 12 people are selected at random. It then goes to trial, and it is up to the jury. The jury is told that they must all agree 12-0 on a guilty or not guilty verdict. Now, this often changes, maybe a couple of hours into the jury deliberation. If they've still not agreed, the judge will say, okay, we will now take a majority verdict. The majority verdict could be 11-1, or if it goes into a second day or a third day, he will allow 10-2. Neil, now what we're hearing from the government is that they want to scrap this system for most crimes. They want to continue jury trials for offences like murder and rape and manslaughter and other public interest cases, whatever that means. What was your reaction when you heard this? I mean, I've got to say, my jaw dropped when I heard this proposal.
My jaw didn't drop. I mean, it's interesting because police officers, I think we're often asked whether or not we believe in the jury system, and when we have cases in front of juries,
Depends what verdict you get.
Well, exactly, and we have an adversarial system in which your barrister is competing with the defence barrister to see who's going to win that case. It should be a search for the truth, but often in British justice, it is basically who performs best on the day and how the witnesses perform best. And of course, they're performing in front of 12 ordinary members of the public who will all come with their own points of view in the world, their own prejudices, their own bias. It's a very subjective test. Now, I would say over 30 years of policing, I can't think of many occasions where the jury, in my view, as the prosecuting authority, the person delivering the evidence to the lawyers for them to contest, has got it wrong. Yeah. So I'm actually, on balance, and you'll find a lot of police officers quite cynical about juries, on balance, I think the jury system does work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work today, though. The system is in utter chaos, isn't it? But that's not because I know what you're going to challenge me and say that's not about the jury system. That's about the criminal justice system being in chaos.
Yeah. Well, listen. Why don't I set out what going to court as a journalist or a member of the public looks like in 2025? You arrive. The case is meant to start at 10. Quite often it won't. That'll be pushed back till 10:30 because there's legal arguments or whatever that are heard in secret. So you don't know what's going on. You're just hanging around. And then the case might get underway if you're lucky before 11. That will run up until lunch. Lunch is at 1. And then there's a break for an hour. And then you'll have a similar type of thing happening in the afternoon. The afternoons generally work a lot smoother. But really, if you look at the hours alone, right? 10 till 1 and then 2 till 4. That's 5 hours they've given themselves. That's not a lot of hours. That's not a full working day. And then they wonder why there's a backlog. And along the way, there's all these cases are littered with legal arguments. It's constant stop and start, stop and start. So my suggestion, rather than taking away, an 8th century old system that seems to be generally working in terms of getting the actual right outcome, why don't you look at making the working day longer? Why don't you look at revolutionising the way courts work rather than take away this pretty monumental step that they're suggesting they take?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right to say it's a centuries-old issue, but the reality, I mean, people think that they have a right to a jury trial.
Yeah.
That was never enshrined in law. It's a sort of constitutional and a democratic right that's come up over those centuries. It's actually mentioned in the Magna Carta that you'll be tried in front of in front of the community. So I get why people think that, but your actual absolute legal right is the right to a fair trial. It's not the right to a jury trial, it's the right to a fair trial. So I think it's important that the public understand that nobody is dismissing a law here by calling for the end of jury trials in most cases. My understanding is murder, rape, cases in the public interest will still be before a jury, but what is leaked is effectively, we think we're going to, more common crimes that would have been held in front of the public will now not be held with a jury, and I can understand why that's caused a lot of anxiety. There's one you'll remember Brian Leveson, the ex-Supreme Court judge who was tasked by the government with doing a review into this not long ago.
Yeah, talk us through the suggestions he had.
His suggestions was that there would be a halfway house between the magistrates' court and the Crown Court jury trial with a judge, and a judge would sit with a couple of magistrates as a sort of a halfway house for cases that weren't so serious that needed to go before a jury. The ones, the murder and the rape, the most serious of offences. But effectively, this would expedite the process. And I don't think Brian Leveson, knowing the judge he wasn't talking about changing a system to make it unfair. He was trying to address a very simple problem with the system now, which is that backlog you mentioned, which I think was at 80,000
Well, yeah,
cases.
it's nearly up to 80,000 now. We've now got trials looking at the end of the 2020s, some cases being scheduled for 2029 in parts of London. And that is more than double than 5 years ago.
Your brilliant and rather emotional interview with our rape victim that we did not long ago. Victims who are treated like that by the system is bad enough. But if you were told, and by the way, your case will come to trial in 4 years' time, do you think you're going to hang in the system there? You're not, are you? No. You're going to drop out. Yeah. And for police officers and for the Crown Prosecution Service and for the defence barristers who are trying to get justice for that victim, trying to keep a victim engaged and stable and, able to commit to the process, even for months is difficult enough. For years is impossible. So when I first heard this, and certainly when I heard about the Leveson report with this, given that 90% of cases are heard in the magistrates' court anyway.
And resolved there,
and effectively, we all know that criminals game the system. They know by pleading not guilty. They know by stretching out the length of time before their trial comes to court, anything could happen. But what they really hope for is any witnesses or victims who are giving evidence against them will drop out of the system. So it's a brilliant way for them to push it into the long grass.
Do you know what? I take your point that you're making, but what's the alternative? The alternative is that a judge will decide the fate of everyone. And let's face it, right? The majority of judges are middle-aged to elderly, white, privileged men. I wouldn't want someone like that just alone judging my case. Just say I'm a young black kid from Brixton. I'm accused of robbing or stabbing someone. I don't want someone who has no idea what my life's like to decide my case for me. Do you take that point?
God, I absolutely take that point. You know me, Mr. Super Woke, so-called head of counterterrorism. And actually, it's really interesting. I mean, I think I must have missed. Was there an announcement by David Lammy that he was going to do this?
No.
Or has this been a kind of one of those classic political leaks?
Yeah, exactly. So what happened was it was leaked, of all days, on Budget Day.
Okay, why was that, do you think?
Well, the cynic in me will suggest that they wanted to bury this and test the waters, shall we say, about what the public think. The reaction has been pretty extraordinary, actually. I mean, we've just seen from callers on LBC, they're all baffled by this.
Is that right? Is that
yeah,
absolutely.
I asked our news desk this morning. I said, "What's the reaction been like?" They said everyone's up in arms. No one can really understand it because they're seeing it, like I said in my intro, that they're taking power away from the people and putting it on the state.
Oh, and there was a poll in a certain broadsheet newspaper that I read called The Times had a 70-30 against this morning.
Absolutely. And if you just have to look at the reaction from the legal side of it as well. I mean, you've even got judges who don't want this to go through. I mean, they say they don't want to be in charge of this.
How interesting is that when you talk about people have been ringing and saying this is riding roughshod over justice. Your very dramatic opening statement about, this is democracy and this is no longer democracy. Yeah. It's a power grab by the state. You're giving all of this power that communities had to decide what was right and wrong in their communities.
Well, normal people, I think that's the point.
Normal people, and you're giving it to this elite group, the judiciary. And the judges have come out and said, we don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. Even the judges don't want it.
And
in my experience, judges like power. And the more power they have, the better.
I'm not going to say anything.
They also like an early finish on a Friday afternoon so they can make their tea time on a weekend.
I wonder whether you'll indulge me for a second, because I had a fairly strong view that Leveson was correct, because what I thought Leveson might be suggesting would be time limited just to get through this backlog. So I'm not suggesting for one moment we need to get into what's actually wrong with the criminal justice system that's created this, and I'm sure we'll get there maybe in the second part of this. But for the moment, one of my best friends was selected and had to serve on 2 juries in the past 12 months. Mm-hmm. So I was really interested in what she would say about, and I'd like to read it out.
Yeah, go on, do it.
It'll only be about a minute, I think, but this is, and thank you very much, Tara. Tara is not only a former businesswoman, a mother of 2 children, and the chair of school governors. She is somebody who didn't have the time to be called to jury service, but thought it was important to do your part. So you talk about jury selection. You know how many people used to get out of jury service by saying, I'm too busy and my employer won't like it and I've got a holiday booked and I'm getting married next week and anything to get out of jury service. Totally. So I was sort of expecting that probably her experience on the jury would lead her to believe that this was a good thing. Yeah. This is what she said. Personally, I think it's an important part of our justice system to ensure that there is, as far as possible, impartiality of those making the decision on someone's future. Mm-hmm. For those of us acting on a jury, there was a significant sense of responsibility to make the right decision. It provided an insight to the complexities of the law and helped to develop a sense of community. I can understand that there might be a temptation to speed things up by removing juries, as the need to ensure everyone has the necessary knowledge to make a considered decision takes time. But that is an important element of the process, ensuring that there are no presumptions or preconceptions. If they wanted to speed things up, they could look at how the days are run, your point. Less than 50% of the time we were on jury service was actually spent in court. We never started before 10:30, you made that point.
There you go.
And we always finished by 4, and we had at least an hour for lunch.
Yeah, at least.
So I thought, Tara, that was brilliant. Because
and thank you, Tara, for siding with me over Neil.
After knowing you for nearly 4 decades, Tara, that's very upsetting, I have to be honest. But that brilliantly in that one sort of paragraph. It cogently states the problem we have here, which is between fairness and efficiency. And you can't. Are we saying we can't have both of those things in the criminal justice system? Yeah. It seems really bizarre that we've reached this point where we have to crash the whole house.
This is it. It sounds as though you're coming round to my way of thinking in this conversation.
It was Tara who changed my mind
Tara,
when I read this. And your brilliant opening introduction.
Right, okay, let's take a break there. After the break, we're going to be looking at what a no jury system will look like. So, Neil, I've kind of laid out why I think this is a bad idea, for all the reasons I've set out. Try and convince me why this is a good thing. What are the potential positives that could come from this?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I was talking about before in terms of the effectiveness of the system as it currently stands today, which is it's broken.
Yeah, it's a shit show.
So, we just talked about the fact that, I think I read somewhere that a rape victim was told your case will be at trial in 2029. We're at the end of 2025. She's got a minimum of 3 years to wait before she faces her accuser, before she has to go through the whole emotional roller coaster of that process, and 3 years to wait.
Disgusting,
knowing that person, her attacker, is probably out on bail somewhere, is probably out there in the community somewhere. That is probably the most shocking indictment of the system as it stands today.
Yeah.
And anything that stops victims not getting any kind of justice. What is the old cliche? Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
It's effectively no justice at all if a victim is not willing to support the process. And that sort of crisis of confidence in the criminal justice system is spreading. So think of a situation in which you don't think as a victim that you will ever see justice. You're never going to give intelligence. You're never going to give a witness statement to the police. You're never going to cooperate with the process. You start to undermine any kind of faith in criminal justice at all, at which point you get anarchy. Yeah. People are not willing to obey the law. And think of what it's like if you're a criminal, where you think, this is all right, I'm never going to face justice.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And if most criminologists will tell you, I've said it on this show before, it isn't the sentencing, it isn't prison, it isn't none of that. They don't care about anything like that. They really care about being caught. If you don't think you're going to be caught and face any kind of sense of justice, the whole system collapses. So my argument is based on, at the moment, the criminal justice system is teetering on the brink of collapse.
Yeah, I agree.
It's collapsing in terms of numbers of police officers, numbers of lawyers, numbers of prison places, numbers of probation officers, and absolutely the number of judges, the number of magistrates, the amount of court time that's available, the crumbling court infrastructure, the closure of courts. The whole thing is collapsing. It needs some emergency medicine.
Yeah, but right, okay, listen, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I just think rather than he's gone, the Justice Secretary's gone straight to the extreme, right? He's gone right. Okay, let's take away juries. That's just such a huge, monumental step. That in itself, I mean, that's going to take a trial period. Excuse the pun. And so when you're completely rewriting a system like that, that itself will put loads more delays in it. Why don't you just do what any other business would do, which is, right, okay, we're lagging behind, we need more staff and we need to work harder, we need more investment. They've not even said that. They've not even looked into that. They're just saying, let's scrap juries, that'll make it quicker. And interestingly, the lawyers themselves, I mean, just this week, 100 lawyers wrote to the Ministry of Justice expressing massive concerns about this. This is including, over 30 odd cases, which are the ones who actually defend or prosecute these trials. They're saying that what you're suggesting, Justice Secretary, will make no difference to delays. What you need to sort out is the way courts and the Justice Department works. Because listen, put it this way. Can you imagine last week the Treasury staff just working 10 till 1, having an hour break, and then 2 till 4, and then buggering off home? No, they would have been there round the clock preparing for the budget. So...
Are you sure?
Well, I might be being a bit kind.
It's not the news agency.
Yeah, sorry. I might be being a bit kind. But you take my point, right? In the Ministry of Justice, it just doesn't work like that. The courts itself, obviously the court staff, they work a lot harder, and they're at the bare bones. And I do feel for these people working in the courts. It's not their fault that it's an absolute shambles. So I would say look in-house first before you start looking at attacking a centuries-old system. That, on the whole, works.
So I'm still slightly stunned that you expected me to let you get away with that trial pun. But you did. You got away by filibustering there. You got away with it.
Yeah,
I think I'm telling you, Andy, you're right. What he has.
Wow! Can we clip that up and just play that? That is the first and possibly the last time you've ever said that.
So I think you're right that he has gone to the extreme. But this is why I asked you whether he'd actually made a statement on this or whether it was leaked. It was leaked because I think this is a classic. Let's test the water.
Yeah, of course.
When the water proves to be way too hot to get in, we'll row back.
Exactly.
And when they row back, they'll end up halfway house. They'll end up with the Leveson recommendations. But, and this is really important, if you're going to do this, you can only do this for a short time. There should be what they used to call with legislation a sunset clause, which basically says we'll do this for a time-limited period. We're doing it as an emergency medicine to try and stabilise the criminal justice system before we fix it. And everything you've just said about fixing the system is absolutely correct. It isn't just jurors and court staff and other people who get frustrated with the system. It's obviously police officers who are away from the street, there to give evidence, don't get on to give evidence. Their time is cancelled. They get paid overtime for going to court, and then they don't get to give evidence. You're breaking the system because the system doesn't work, because there aren't enough days actually where the courts are sitting. The hours aren't long enough. And do you know who decides all of that court listing and how those trials are put together and who's going to sit on what days and when? It's the judiciary. Yeah. So they still have the power. They are the people who are monitoring the system and actually making it work or not work, as the case may be. First thing you got to do is get some professional management into the running of the system.
Is this you offering yourself up as a consultant?
Absolutely not. But I know some very good transformational experts, Nina, if you're listening, who should be running the court system, in my view, because it would run much more like clockwork.
That's your wife, by the way, dear listener.
She'll hate me for saying that. But the 24/7 court system that was brought in, and do you remember for many years ago during the 2011 riots?
Yeah.
They were trying to get through. You know, there is no reason why we shouldn't be having video courts or 24/7 courts but there is one very good reason for that. There's been no money in this system for nearly 15 years. And the result of that is not enough judges, and we'll go on to the male, pale and stale problem that we've got as well. But you've got not enough judges, not enough court staff, not enough members of the probation service, not enough people doing pre-sentence reports, there is not enough people in this system, and that needs money. And the reason this is being done is because there's no money to fix the system as it should be fixed, opposed to, what has got to be the ultimate throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is throwing away the system that does appear to work, and more importantly, works more fairly than a judge system on its own. And do you know who found that out?
Go on.
David Lammy.
When
he was Shadow Justice Secretary, 2017, the Lammy report into the criminal justice system said the one thing that juries do is they prevent discrimination against ethnic minorities, because the system that you described and I've described as male, pale and stale, and my words there, but a largely middle to upper class, white, highly educated, elderly population deciding the fate of young people and young ethnic minorities is not going to deliver a fair and balanced verdict.
No,
that's what the Lammy Review found out in 2017. And he is about to reintroduce, which has got to be against everything David Lammy stands for and has said. So I predict that when he actually comes out to make a statement, did you say it might be?
I think he's
tomorrow.
By the time this is out,
I think if he listens to this, he should listen to this first and then moderate his position.
Exactly.
Because Andy said so.
Well, exactly. So listen, let's look at. Jury trials don't happen all over the world. Look at some of our biggest nations: Germany, Italy, South Africa. None of them use jury trials, but also some of the most controversial trials in history have been in front of just a judge. Look at the Amanda Knox case, where in 2007 she allegedly or was accused of murdering her roommate, Meredith Kircher. She was convicted in 2009 by an Italian court with no jury, based on a judge and minors, like, a couple of magistrates. And then that was then overturned. So she was found guilty, then found innocent, then found guilty again, then found innocent again. So by the time, and that never would have happened with a jury trial. And then, of course, you've got the case of Oscar Pistorius, who was the Paralympian South African sprinter known as Blade Runner. He, on the 14th of February 2013, shot and killed Reva Steenkamp, his girlfriend. He basically claimed he mistook her for an intruder. But he was initially convicted of culpable homicide, which in our terms is manslaughter. But then the Court of Appeal then upgraded the conviction in 2015 to murder and increased his sentence. And again, there was lots of criticism about this case, and particularly at that one judge making the decision. I mean, how can one person decide the fate of that? And these are the drawbacks that we've seen over the years in very high-profile cases. So, listen, yes, jury trials aren't perfect, but we've just given you two examples there of a known jury system not working.
Yeah, and I think we used to be much more deferential towards authority than we are today. We've known that for decades. Most people don't listen to figures of authority without good evidence these days. But if we were having this conversation maybe 30 or 40 years ago, people would have said, no, a judge is absolutely the right person. They've got all the skills and the technical capability, and they'll be able to weigh up the evidence, and they'll be much fairer. Well, many studies have shown that that just isn't the case. So the prospect of miscarriages of justice, I mean, there is a reason why we no longer have the death penalty in this country. It's because better that one guilty person goes free than an innocent person is killed by the state. So if we extrapolate that out to miscarriages of justice, where people are going to end up spending a very long time behind bars searching for appeal because the system has gone wrong, because one person has made that decision and their biases and their prejudice came into, which was precisely the point of the Lamy Review in 2017. That would be a colossal mistake.
Well, I texted a lawyer contact of mine before we recorded, and I said,
you don't have to speak to your lawyer before speaking to me. Anyway.
Well, I do. And I said to him, what do you make of all this? And he just said, listen, jury trials reduce the risk of individual error. That's why we like them. And it kind of sums up everything in that one sentence.
And of course it does. 12 minds collectively.
Exactly. Yeah.
Much better than one. They can have you can have a debate. You will have. That's the other thing. Tara was saying. Lots of us go around our lives in. We speak to the same friends. We deal with the same colleagues. We tend to have the same interests. This is one of the very few times in your life where you're going to end up in a room with people, quite often vastly different from you. You're going to experience a little bit more of, and the way she describes this, there was a real sense of community about wanting justice to be seen and done. That was a remarkable insight into how a jury performs. No system is foolproof, but the one that is probably going to result in fairer outcomes at scale is going to be the jury system, isn't it? So look, you've taken less than half an hour to completely change my mind. You and Tara.
No, exactly. That's first time for everything, Neil. We're going to take a break there. After the break, we're going to be looking at the Palestine Action protests. These numbers are racking up more and more every single week, it seems, and piling more pressure on the justice system. Back with that after this. Coming in a few days, Neil, we've got the return of our Q&A episode. I'm very much looking forward to that. I've just been looking through the questions, and there's one that kind of applies to this subject that we're talking about now, and it comes from Yaha on email. As an onlooker, I'm startled by videos of police arresting mainly elderly and sometimes blind and disabled people taking part in Palestine Action protests. How do you think police feel about situations like this? Do you think there is a significant number of officers for whom this doesn't sit well at all? Just to remind people before you answer there, Neil, Palestine Action are a protest group that were banned and prescribed as a terrorist group by the Home Secretary. When was it? Earlier this year? No. Yeah, it was earlier. It was in about July or something, wasn't it? So since then, there's been several protests, and because this protest group is now banned, everyone who supports them is now arrested under terrorism laws. We've had thousands of arrests over the course of many weeks now, And now we've got hundreds of cases around the country going through this very clogged up justice system that we've just been talking about. But why don't you just answer that question about how do you think police feel about this when they're at the rallies? I mean, let's face it, you look at some of the footage and they look pretty uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, I mean, Yaya, thank you very much for the question. I hope I've got your name right as well. But I was, it's a really good question. And thank you for asking it, because not many people put themselves in the shoes of a police officer asked to enforce a law that they don't necessarily want to enforce or believe in. And I would suggest that has been a difficulty for the thin blue line for as long as policing has been around. It is not a police officer's job to judge whether the law is fair or not. Their job is to enforce it or apply it. So they're not really given any choice. And on the basis of that, facing somebody who is elderly, incapacitated, clearly not a criminal, clearly not a danger to society, and having to arrest that person is always going to sit badly with a good cop.
Well, just a terrible look in it as well.
That's not why you joined the job, and is always going to be an incredibly difficult thing. But to defend my old colleagues, they have no choice.
They don't.
They have absolutely no choice about this. And once that action is taken, and don't forget, this is a very serious offence to be supporting a proscribed terrorist group. I mean, if those people were out there campaigning on behalf of Al Qaeda or ISIS, we wouldn't bat an eyelid, or National Action, or one of the extreme right-wing groups, two of which were banned at the same time as Palestine Action. Nobody would be batting an eyelid. And I've said it before, it would be great if protesters weren't trying to test the system with their own liberty, but that's what protest is about, and actually just held up their placards to support Palestine rather than Palestine Action.
Well, this is it.
But they're not going to do that. They're trying to test this system to breaking point. And I think the point of raising it in this is you're obviously going to make the point that those cases, when they come to trial, will be going to trial before a judge and a jury. Now, if those cases were going to trial just before a judge, and you remember, you're too young to remember, but the Troubles, so the diplock courts in Northern Ireland, which were basically trying the IRA, were done in secret without a jury, and those took place. If we had a system where there was no jury to examine whether the law is fair and consistently and well applied, you were going to have a single judge sitting on a case which is pretty much cut and dried. Yeah. You know, it is an absolute offence. It comes with a significant prison sentence. You are talking about a lot of people going to jail who, as Yaya describes here, are elderly, sometimes blind and disabled. I mean, could that be right? I strongly suspect that a jury would look at those individuals with no prior criminal record, with no history of violence or damage to or supporting terrorist causes, and look at that and say, I'm not sure. I mean, if and this is the whole point, we don't know how juries deliberate. It is sometimes good that they are a foil to the judicial process and the cold, hard evidence, that sometimes they exercise common sense. One of the greatest examples of that in the last 5 years was, do you remember the toppling of the Colston statue in Bristol?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was
done by the students or whatever.
But basically, it was Black Lives Matters activists,
plus
students, plus protesters, all protesting against the murder of George Floyd in the United States.
That was it.
Protesting against this symbol of Bristol, Robert Colston, who was a slave owner, and how he'd made his fortune, and deciding we've had enough of that statue, we're going to put it in the river.
Yeah,
it was
did.
I mean, it was on TV, so it's a clear, cut and dried example of criminal damage. There is no way a defence barrister would have gone, well, I'll give you a defence, but this is going to be pretty tough. And the jury acquitted them all. And the jury are basically saying is, look, at the end of the day, our ethics and our values say, I don't really care what that is, we're going to acquit. And I did hear that Shami Chakrabarti, obviously a current Labour MP, I think now, but a former director of Liberty, has come out against these proposals for the jury trials and say sometimes it is important that without complicated decision-making and rationale, the juries are just allowed to make decisions based on what they see before them. I think she's right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of police officers will feel that way.
I tell you what's interesting about this question. He rightly points out that you can see in the officers' faces they do not want to be doing this, but again, they have to. If you speak to actually a lot of police officers, they all tell me that they wish they hadn't been prescribed at this time because not enough was known about Palestine Action. We're now going through the first of many criminal trials where you see the evidence of pretty serious violence, where police officers are getting kind of spinal injuries. And that is really what police officers have been wanting to come out. Obviously, we don't know the way this trial is going to go. And it's ongoing at the minute, and the defence haven't said their part yet. But if you speak to police officers, they all tell me, why did you prescribe them so early on? Why didn't you prescribe them after all the criminal trials, where the public would have had more of a chance to understand about this actual protest group and what they were doing and how allegedly violent they were?
I guess the argument for my old position is that... So I'm going to be devil's advocate here and say the reason why they were prescribed early, I would have thought, the same reason that any terrorist group is prescribed, is that by that prescription, it opens up an entire toolbox of powers for the intelligence agencies and counter-terrorism policing to move in and try and break that organisation. We did it very effectively with National Action after Amber Rudd, our fellow podcaster, prescribed them in 2016. It gave us an opportunity we didn't have before.
Totally different, though, isn't it? When you're looking at, these extreme neo-Nazi groups, and then you're looking at Palestine Action, which they argue they are a non-violent organisation.
Well, and this is what we need to see in the trial. But when you say totally different, at the time that National Action was prescribed, people didn't know what we knew. All they knew was that they had gone on... They'd basically gone on the internet and they had glorified the murder of Joe Cox, who was a beloved MP, and it was a pretty disgusting thing to say. And they were effectively glorifying an act of extreme right-wing terrorism. They were prescribed on that basis. What people didn't know was the other stuff they were plotting in the background, including the murder of an MP. Yeah. So
Rosie Cooper, wasn't it? A Labour MP. Yeah.
So that violent rhetoric was going on in the background. And when Yvette Cooper originally prescribed Palestine Action, one of the things she said in public was, you need to wait and understand. I cannot talk about all of the intelligence. And she's right about that. There is a reason why we have secrets. The public will always, in this day and age, want to know everything about everything. They can't. If they want to be kept safe, there are things that cannot be disclosed immediately. She was saying, wait till you see the evidence. But I have to do that now. And my devil's advocate position is they were doing it now because they were taking action against Palestine Action. And Palestine Action, if you're a protester and you follow this trial closely and you watch the evidence, when you've done that, then decide whether
exactly. Yeah, I think that's in fact that's what police officers want to happen. Yes. What they did is they just created this opportunity for these protests to happen because there was a vacuum in knowledge that allows people who are a large amount of them are professional protesters. Before this, they were protesting for Extinction Rebellion. Before that, after that, they were protesting for Just Stop Oil. So these people have history. What's the phrase again? What these people have form. That's the one I'm looking for.
Excellent use of the expression form. I'd just like to say hindsight's a wonderfully precise forensic tool for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah, well, of course it is. I'll tell you what, on that bit of wisdom from you, Neil, let's leave it there. Thanks for listening to The Crime Agents with me, crime journalist Andy Hughes.
And me, ex-cop Neil Basu.
See you next week. Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
The Crime Agents.